Um, that way, if anyone needs to drop off to do things associated with life, you will be able to catch where you left and catch up on the conversations here tonight. And it looks like we have a pretty good group of folks here. So I think we are going to start moving forward. We've got a great team from the city, and Riley is going to be progressing the show here. So I know a lot of you / all of you have participated in a lot of virtual meetings. We're gonna, because of the size of this meeting, we're gonna place all participants on mute, and we'll pause periodically for questions and discussion. There's a chat window that will be monitored where you'll be where you can ask questions. So please follow those rules. And if we have just one note, since we are going over a number of things tonight, if somebody has a really detailed question, we might pause on that and follow up directly with you and put something in one of the project FAQs. So just want folks to be aware of that. And Riley, if we can go to the next. So I've been mentioning that we're going over a number of projects tonight. One is the namesake, the Northeast Downtown and 5 Points Action Plan. We also have a project update on the 27th Storm Interceptor Phase 4 coming soon. And then the Stout Street two-way conversion study. So a lot of information, and we want to be able to have a conversation with you. Just going into introductions, I'll be moderating the whole kit and caboodle. I'm Karen Good, a community designer with DOTI. And we have from our NEDFP team, Brett Boncory and Riley Lemie here as well. So let's get into it. We're going through our welcome and meeting purpose, and then jump into some current and recently completed projects, as well as our action plan prioritization summary, get you up to speed on that, and our prioritized projects, as well as our next steps and timeline. So I am going to talk a little, the study area. Again, I know a lot of you have been really engaged and very aware of the Northeast Downtown 5 Points Action Plan, and the study area encompasses 5 points and goes a little bit outside of the Curtis Park 5 Points area, so that we're capturing the edges there. And this is based on that Northeast Downtown Next Step study from 2015, and pulls in information from a wide number and variety of other plans in the area. So with that, a chance for you all to speak. We will be having 2 polling sessions, each with 2 questions during the course of this meeting. And a polling window will pop up on your screen. Just follow the instructions to select your answer, and we'll close the poll in 1 minute. It should have popped up on your screen already. And there's a little clock ticking there as to tell us a little bit about your relationship to the area and how you interact with the neighborhoods here, whether you live here, commute here, use for recreation, school, etc. And there's a little bar there, so you can scroll down. There's a lot of info there, and it looks like we've got 50% of people participating, and I know a few people are just popping on. So we'll give it another couple seconds. And great. Looks like we've got a lot of folks that participated, and we are, question 1, we have highest percentage of folks that live in the neighborhood. A few folks commute through, and people use it for recreation and shopping, events, etc. So let's jump in, the magic in the world of Oz, jump into question number 2. And I think this one's fun. There's so many great events in Northeast downtown, the 5 Points neighborhoods. What are your favorite events? And please select all that apply. I'm certainly excited that the Jazz Fest is coming back this year. I just looked up the date now, I forget it, but very exciting that we'll have Jazz Fest and a lot of great events coming back this year. Looks like my favorite of the Jazz Fest is winning here so far. Not that you can lose with events, because it's wonderful that you can go to all of them. And I was curious if anyone has been to the outdoor market thrift pop, and it seems like at least one person has, or so that's interesting. I'm going to have to stop by there sometime. All right, it looks like we've kind of hit the end of our participants, and as I was giving you sort of the live action, and a lot of folks interested in Jazz Fest, as well as the First Fridays Jazz Hop, and Juneteenth, as well as the Rhino Live Walls, and the Colorado Black Arts Festival, and just one person to the outdoor thrift market. So hope some people start going to Thrift Pop. I think it's 27th and Lermerish. Great. Well, let's jump forward to our next slide, and I'm going to pass the mic to Brett, and he is going to give you information about the current and recent projects, which some of you are familiar with and some of you may not be.
Oh yeah, thanks, Karen. Like Karen mentioned, my name is Brett Boncory, program manager for the NTMP program and the NEDFP project that we are talking about today. So kind of just want to give a brief overview of projects, just to kind of acknowledge the fact that we have had quite a few projects already completed in the area, including 21st and Broadway crossing, some not so recent, but have been completed in the past. You know, our conversions of 1 to 2-way streets at Blake and Walnut. As part of our 5 Points NTMP, we had over 40 operational and safety projects installed. You know, and of course they've been there for a minute, but our Stout and Champa bikeways, as well as 38th and Blake Station. And on the next slide, you'll see we also have quite a bit just around the corner that's going to be coming into the Northeast downtown and 5 Points neighborhoods. If you go to the next slide, if it works. Okay, cool. And these projects, like I said, they're coming soon. We're actually in the middle of procuring a construction contractor for these right now. So they're right around the corner for us in our world here. And these came directly from the 5 Points NTMP action plan that occurred a couple of years ago. There's 6 projects that came directly from the NTMP plan. You can see here just a couple highlights. The RFB at 32nd and Champa, that's the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, basically helping to bring more awareness to the pedestrian crossing there right next to the park. And then as well as, you know, kind of enhancing Champa and Stout streets with some painted bulb outs and making vehicle movements a little clearer, and converting a section of 28th Street just east of Welton to 2-way. That's that section that's between Welton and the Glenarm Rec Center and the Denver Health Clinic, where it's 1-way, converting it to 2-way, hoping to open up more access into that Welton Street business district and kind of just clarify some confusion there and some safety issues we're seeing there. If you go to your next slide. This is just an extension of the projects that are coming soon. And I think in our last meeting, we mentioned this as well. It should be familiar to most, is the expanded pedestrian plaza. So this is at the intersection of Welton Street, 26th Ave, 27th Street, and Washington Street. And what we're doing here with Flex Post and Paint is improving intersection safety at that location by slowing down turning movements, decreasing pedestrian crossing distances, but also we're kind of getting some space to where we can actually activate that space with art, street murals. And so we've procured a couple artists to help us do that. to install that street mural and help us to activate that space, along with the bid in the community in that area. In addition, along Welton Street, which is also coming around the corner, is flex post and paint bulb outs at some select intersections along Welton Street. That's at 24th, 25th, 27th, and 29th. Similar to the Plaza project, these are smaller opportunities, but still opportunities to improve pedestrian safety and increase placemaking. Those artists will be painting street murals in those as well. You can kind of just see a photo here on the bottom right of a recent similar implementation on Santa Fe Drive. And then just wanted to give a quick plug to Stout Street two-way conversion study, which also came out of the NTMP, which will be talked about later on in detail in this meeting.
And one quick thing before we pass the mic to Riley, Brett, can you explain our acronyms of what we affectionately called NEDFP and NTMP? Yes,
I'm sorry. Sorry about any confusion there. So NEDFP stands for the Northeast Downtown in 5 Points Action Plan. That's the study area that Karen had presented earlier. So it encompasses all the neighborhoods that were in the Northeast Step study. And then NTMP, it's the program that most of this work has kind of derived from, is the Neighborhood Transportation Management Program. That's a program that goes throughout all of Denver's neighborhoods, prioritize them according to equity, multimodal demand, and safety to go in and do kind of neighborhood level traffic calming and infrastructure projects. So
awesome. Thank you so much. And Riley, can you fill us in a little bit on the community survey results and process?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Riley Lemie. I'm with DOTI, or the Denver Department of Transportation Infrastructure City Planner. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Northeast Downtown 5 Points Action Plan process. So this is a multi-year program that is looking at adding transportation infrastructure and infrastructure investments into both the Northeast Downtown and 5 Points neighborhood. So this is a partnership between both DOTI and the Denver Office of Economic Development, or DOTI for short. And what we're looking at is short-term projects. And so we have some funding that is available for short-term projects. And you might recall that many of you that are on this call now participated last summer in an effort where we asked you to help us prioritize those short-term or near-term projects. So that meeting was actually back in August of 2021. And then we said we would come back to this group once we heard from the community and had time to digest that information. And so that's kind of what we're here to do tonight, is to share the results of that prioritization effort. So just to recap your memory, the near-term projects, I won't go into great detail about all of these, but the projects that are displayed on the map, this shows some of the different projects that we asked the community to prioritize. And this included everything from the permanent version of the 5 Points Plaza to a lane reduction on Welton Street, and then other improvements that were geared towards safety or streetscaping or landscaping improvements. So again, we asked the community to prioritize these improvements with the funding that we have that's available to us, and did that last August. And what we're going to share now is the results of that. So as you can see on the graphic on my screen, these are the projects that rose to the top. So we kind of picked 5 projects based on what we heard that we're able to move forward with based on the near-term funding that we have available from the partnership between DOTI and DOTI, as well as ones that we're able to move forward with from leveraging other resources. And so I'm going to hand it off to Brett, who's going to go into some details.
Yeah, and Riley, I'm going to jump in with a question from the community that's probably maybe a little bit of you and maybe a little bit of Brett, or maybe all Brett. Since all of these projects were prioritized, will they still all eventually happen? And that, Brett, is probably a little bit hard to answer at this juncture, but Maybe we can talk about that a little bit in relation to some of the things that are happening as we go through what's happening now and recently completed.
Yeah, so
We get Welton Street trees.
So the short answer is, we have a limited amount of funding to advance. We knew kind of at the outset that we were not going to be able to do all of the projects on this list, which is really why that it was really important to hear from the community about which ones were most important to them, because we have a lot of projects and a limited amount of resources. Now, what you'll hear about later on in the presentation is not that we're going to ignore the rest of the projects that didn't get funding, but it's that these are still on our list to fund and to pursue potential funding for those projects in the future. So these near-term projects, just like Riley had mentioned, are ones that we're prioritizing and that we can move forward with near-term funds, if that makes sense. So these are ones that are actually can move forward and will have funding for construction, through construction.
Great. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, which I think kind of dovetails perfectly into the next slide, which is talking about these 5 projects that we're able to advance from the community survey. The first one is what we're calling the permanent 5 Points pedestrian plaza expansion. This was the highest priority project from the survey, which was the permanent expansion of that 5 Points intersection plaza. This is, again, this is at the intersection of Welton Street, 26th Ave, 27th Street, and Washington Street. I mentioned that we had an upcoming project to expand this plaza in flex post and paint in the near term, in the next couple months. Well, that's a pretty temporary version of that, right? That's an adaptive version with just those flex post bollards and just paint. Well, what this project would do is, once we get to do design and able to construct probably a couple of years out now, a few years out, we would make this permanent through the use of actual concrete. So this would be like the photo, like the graphic here is showing. It's raised concrete pedestrian islands with those bulb outs. Those are the things on the corners that kind of help to clarify the vehicle movements. This also slows down vehicle turning speeds, which in the end really enhances pedestrian safety. That's paramount for us at DOTI. And in addition, I mean, the bulk of this, though, is to really expand that pedestrian plaza that's right there. This is, if you can imagine this is like right in front of Melody Market, which just opened up, at the Point. This is across from Famous J's and all those businesses right in that area. And there's a lot of synergy there, especially with the events. And so what we're hoping to do is to add infrastructure in this plaza to support events as well, like Jazz Fest, whether that be, electric outlets or trees, green infrastructure that we're actually able to do once we're actually making this concrete, right? So this is the first one that was prioritized and would make it in concrete. The next step on this project would be to scope the final design of the project and do that final design to advance towards construction. The next slide. Another important priority of the community that we saw from the survey is for Welton Street trees. What this is to add street trees to the Welton Street corridor. This is actually, as some of you might know, an existing effort by forestry to renew the tree pits along Welton Street to further increase the green canopy in that area. So with this currently being underway, really our next step is to continue to coordinate with forestry to fill any gaps that they have and find any opportunities for us to add value to that project and get that green canopy increased. Next slide. This is another big one. Next project that was prioritized by the community was the Welton Street Streetscape and Green Infrastructure project. So similar to the Plaza expansion project, this project would add bulb outs. That's those extensions of the curb into the street to decrease pedestrian crossing distances, which increases pedestrian safety. And in those bulb outs, like you're seeing in that photo there, add trees and green infrastructure at the corners. This not only obviously adds to placemaking in that area, but it also gives vertical elements and helps to even more slow down turning movements and make it a safer place for folks. I mentioned it earlier.
Brett?
Yeah.
We have some questions. Can you explain a little bit how the bulb outs work and whether that's the same as daylighting? And would the trees, if there's a kind of follow on that, would the vegetation in those green infrastructure areas eventually be a concern of blind spots, and a little bit maybe about the site triangles that we work with at
Sure.
those intersections?
Yeah. So the bulb outs themselves, as you can see in this photo, they actually bring the curb further into that roadway, all along that corner of a corner or all corners of the intersection. And what that actually does is, right now vehicles can take pretty fast turns because they can take pretty broad turns. What this actually does is it tightens up that turning for vehicles so that a vehicle has to slow down before they turn and cross that pedestrian crosswalk. So what it's really doing is decreasing those speeds so that it's at a more pedestrian scale. And so it feels like it's a safer, more comfortable area. So that's really what it does. And we're really pushing out the curb line to do that. It is related to daylighting. In that daylighting, we're just pulling back parking through the use of signs. What this is doing is physically preventing folks from parking near that intersection. So physically preventing folks from parking in that site triangle, if that makes sense.
And Brett, would you say the biggest difference really between daylighting and the bulb outs is that you're shortening the crossing distance with those bulb outs, whereas daylighting, you're just opening up the visuals for folks to make it safer? They're both safety, but bulb outs are a bigger step.
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
That's exactly right. And then as far as the blind spot question, that's a very good point. No trees would be able to be placed in places where it's going to cut off sight distance when you're pulling in. So where we place those trees will be very strategic and outside of what we call our sight triangles at the intersection. So.
Great. Well, I'm going to let you carry on, but if folks are looking at the chat, Keith, let folks know that they're planting 11 trees on April 30th in Sunny Lawson and Cousins Plaza. So look at that or follow up with Keith for some more information there.
Great, thanks. Great questions. And just real quick before going to the next slide, I know I'm short on time here, but one thing that will be included with what we're calling the Welton Street Streetscape project is adding pedestrian wayfinding signage, we're hoping, and any project will include public art as well. And those will all be processes that we part of the project. We will have our own public meetings for these things as they move forward. So you'll certainly hear more information about that later. Next project is Curtis Street pedestrian enhancements. This came from the Northeast Downtown Next Step study, and will implement bike and pedestrian safety enhancements that select intersections along Curtis Street, specifically between Broadway and 30th Street. So this would typically be in the form of bulb outs and other forms of traffic calming. That's that project. Next step would be design on that one as well. And next slide. This project, the Broadway crossings improvements, is I think this is our last prioritized project that we have funding. We have the ability to fund. And
at the moment,
near-term funding. Yeah. So this came out of Denver Moves Downtown. It's actually an effort that our very own Riley Lemie led. And it was to construct pedestrian and bike improvements at select intersections along Broadway. As you know, Broadway is a huge,
it's a challenging intersection.
Challenging road between, the diagonal grid and the rest of downtown. And so looking to design and implement safety enhancements like bulb outs, curb extensions, median islands, changes to some signal operations that are favorable to pedestrians at these 5 intersections here that you see on the screen. This picture is just an example of one that we did on Colfax more recently. It'd be similar type improvements.
And Brett, one of the questions that's come up is what is the specific timing for these near-term projects? And I don't know that, as you can see, most of these are in design, and we do have, I don't know that we have a lot more detail on the timing for construction, but
So yeah, that kind of gets to our next steps slide,
Yeah.
which we'll get there. And I'll explain that at that point.
yeah, perfect. That's what I thought.
Yeah, because it's all kind of one conversation. Yeah. So just real quickly before I get there, the last thing we wanted to talk about was these long-term projects. This is in that category of projects that are higher dollar. We don't necessarily have the funding for them right now. But we wanted to take the opportunity to check in with the community to understand which of these longer term higher price tag efforts were the highest priorities to the community. And so these are the projects that will be prioritized for funding opportunities in the long term. Now, Stout Street two-way conversion, this one, which you'll hear about in a second, for the design and construction, basically, as we kind of get that project ready. Right now it's in a little bit more of that planning realm, which you'll hear more about in this meeting. But basically this is telling us, hey, this is a huge priority. We'll definitely make sure we look for funding opportunities for that. In the 31st pedestrian bridge, figuring out what happens on Welton Street. These are things that are basically popping up high for us to figure out in the long term. Next slide. And yeah, you can just go to the next slide. So as far as next steps and kind of to answer that question, we're at April 6th. That's where we are right now. We promised to report back and to present our next steps. Really, this summer, we're going to make sure all our funding is in order and start scoping out these projects and procuring a design consultant for these projects. For the first thing that needs to happen is to do final design on these to make sure everything checks out. And then starting in the fall is when we're hoping that these design projects would start. So really in the fall, maybe bleeding into the winter, is really where you'll start to hear a little bit more activity around each one of these individual projects. And then construction would happen sometime after that, probably even 2023 and beyond, to be honest, maybe even 24 for some of these.
Yeah.
So.
And I think we've hit most of the questions during the course of our conversation. I noticed that somebody does have a comment about Stout two-way conversion. So we'll talk about, we have a whole section on that and a project team waiting to fill you in. And then we do have somebody that jumped on late and was wondering the status of the bike ped bump out or similar for 33rd and Lawrence. Brett, I am not remembering that specific element, the bike ped bump out at 33rd and Lawrence. I'm sure you do. I sure hope you do.
Good question. So at the risk of making all these projects even more complex, there's a whole nother layer of projects that Riley and I are working, Karen are working on, called the Community Works projects. And that's where we're rolling out a huge package of bikeway projects in this area and all of central Denver, really. And that project is still moving forward. That's the Lawrence Street neighborhood bikeway, I think, that you're referencing. That Lawrence and 33rd Street, that's still moving forward. Those bikeway projects, if you've been in those meetings with Riley leading them, all that stuff still moving forward. We just didn't lump it into this fold because at the being a little unwieldy. So,
and to that point, Brett, I will we'll put the link to that in the chat for folks because we've got a great website with a lot of information on that central CTN. We'll make sure to get that in. And then there was a question about construction starting sooner than fall winter for any of the projects like the 5 Points Plaza. Brett, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the flex post and paint version, the more adaptive version is what we call it, where we have just striping and then the white candlesticks with we're gonna have some planters and some street furniture out there. that will occur this summer. That will occur in the next few months, really. We're just kind of getting a contractor on board to do that work right now, which will be in the next, but that will be in the ground next few months. The longer term project, the more permanent one with raised concrete, maybe adding trees to the actual plaza itself, talking to the community, figuring out other elements that would be helpful for not only the businesses in that area, but the Jazz Fest and things like that. That definitely is beyond this year. That's a larger project. There's a lot of things to be considered when it comes to design, including drainage and what we're going to do with the traffic signal there, or if there's any modifications to the traffic signal as part of this. So that's a much longer time frame. But like I said, probably starting design of that in the fall, probably bleeding into next year, and then construction would be after that, either late 2023 or 2024.
Great. And I was able to put, depending on how you read it, the Central or the Central Network CTN link that is in the chat now. Apologies for the typo. And then I think we've covered that. There's some folks with comments about not in favor of closing 24th at Broadway, which has been considered, and fully study options for that intersection. So thank you for that comment. Just looking through to make sure that we have covered, looks like we have covered our conversation specifically. Oh, and sorry, I apparently am just not. I will get the link to the everyone. Sorry about that. I'm flailing miserably here. I was telling Kathy Strugel how wonderful it was to see her for the first time and see in a virtual way her for years. So she got the Central Network link. And another quick question that somebody is typing, waiting for it to pop up.
Just a real quick thing while we're waiting there. The Stout Street, I see a lot of questions about Stout Street. The whole team is going to give you a really detailed breakdown of Stout Street and why it has to be converted in a little bit here. So,
so please hold on that. And then there's a question about Walnut Street, and that's a little outside of where we're talking about. Brett and I have worked on that. We have recently put some stop control on Walnut, but I'd like to get to our next project, and we can follow up with you directly if you have any questions on Walnut. So with that, we are going to, and we can also hit on that at the end of the meeting if we have time. So we're jumping to Aaron talking about the 27th Street Storm Interceptor Phase 4. Phase 1, you might have liked. Phase 2, exciting. Phase 3, going on now. Phase 4, coming soon. So Aaron, I will stop talking and give you an opportunity to share information on this.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate that. Yeah, and like Karen was saying, this is phase 4 of a 4-phase project. So this actually completes the entire system once we get to that phase. And we're going to go through some quick introductions, the project team, as well as some of the details, and then how to get in touch with the project team. Next slide. So this is me, Aaron McMichael. I'll be the construction project manager for phase 4. I've also been the project manager for phase 2 and 3. And Kelly Crum, who couldn't make it here tonight, she was the design project manager. Currently, we're in the design phase for phase 4. So she's real integral in that process.
Hey, Aaron, quick question. I know you were having some technical issues before. Is there any way that you could turn your camera on so that we could see your face?
Oh, you can't see?
Oh, it's black screen.
So,
I think
he's talking on his phone. I think he's got his video on his computer.
okay. Ignore me, Aaron. You're fine.
Okay.
So we can see it. It's just not the same one that the audio is coming through.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I
there's-
was just seeing your black one. You're good. You're good. You're good.
Gotcha. Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties, but we will move on. So on this slide, we're talking about the what. So this phase, this entire 4 phases of 27th is the aim is to improve public safety by installing large storm sewer drains to relieve drainage and flooding issues in the 5 Points, Curtis Park neighborhood, as well as the Rhino Art District. And what are we doing? Basically, we're going down the street. We're installing a large pipe to replace the pipe that's in the ground now. And we're on top of that, we're doing new ADA ramps, sidewalk
Me too,
improvements
actually.
all along the corridor, new curb and gutter, new inlets, laterals at all the intersections. I believe we're going about 4 blocks on phase 4. And we're also helping with some of the bikeway improvements in conjunction with the 22nd Avenue Bikeway project. And then the big thing, it'll be all new asphalt all the way down from basically 25th Avenue to just south of 22nd Avenue. So be a big improvement.
And Aaron, you just got to the perfect place because somebody said, where is this? So here's the slide where where is this? You can dive into a little bit and
Perfect timing. Yeah. So as you can see from the slide, we're going to start right where phase 3 leaves off, just south of 25th Avenue. And then we'll start installing the large pipe, go all the way down through 24th Avenue, 23rd, 22nd, and eventually end up just north of Park Avenue, right there by the Safeway, right up in that area. But yeah, it's about a 4.5 block long project, and will be quite involved.
you don't say.
Absolutely, we're going to become friends with everybody in the neighborhood. It's and I'll be the one on site. So if you see me running around on site, feel free to stop me. Should we any questions coming in?
No, that was the big one. And
Okay.
let's move forward and we'll
Open it
interrupt
up.
you again, Aaron, you know,
Okay. No problem.
open
No
that.
problem. So here's a slide that kind of shows the why. As you can see, this is, I believe, the 27th. This is 27th Street and the 5 Points intersection on Welton. And you can see that there's quite a bit of surface runoff that ends up inundating the storm system there and causes flooding to some of the residents as well as the businesses. And to the right, you can see that this is the entire basin that kind of drains down into that area. It's called the Lower Montclair Basin. And you can see it's a pretty wide area. So the amount of water that ends up down in that intersection is quite a lot. So that's why the need for the larger storm sewer pipe.
My favorite graphic here.
This
I
is
love the
pretty
history of it
cool.
all.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. This is how they used to do it back in the old days. You know, this is a brick storm sewer main, and these are some of the brick layers that were putting it together. And these are the storm sewer systems that we're currently trying to upgrade. You know, they're over 100 years old, like a lot of the neighborhoods, and they're just not big enough to accept all the storm sewer flow that's coming in with all the development that's happened in Denver in the last, 20, 25 years. But yeah, so you can see here that the existing pipe, it's roughly about 48 inches. And the new pipe that we're going to be installing is about 78 inches. So pretty big upgrade to the storm system. And yeah, it helps carry the water down the river. And so the win, we're hoping to bid this project this summer. So, we don't have an absolute deadline there, but it will happen sometime this summer. And then we do expect the project to begin construction in early 2023. So, January, February, March, somewhere around there in 2023. This is some of the how. So you can see here, this is very similar to what you'll be seeing on Washington Street, and probably if you've been down to our current project on phase 3, some of what you've seen. But yeah, we have large equipment that needs to come down the street to install these large new pipe in the ground, and this is the shoring system that keeps all the workers safe down underground there. So it's pretty invasive. We come through, trim all the trees, you know, remove all the curb and gutter in the road, and then put the pipe in the ground. And it's very, very involved, is I guess the best way to describe it, and very loud. But we do try to march down the road as quickly as possible so that we don't, you know, disturb anybody for too long. All very
And safely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Safety is our number one goal, and that's why we do have the fencing on the sides as well. Impacts. So we're looking at closing only 2 blocks and 2 intersections at a time. Mainly that's to give the contractor room to kind of spread out with all their equipment and materials, and give them room to have some of that storage. Pedestrian access to residents and businesses inside the project area will always be open, and we'll have signage that will clearly define any of the detour routes that are up for either pedestrians or for traffic as well. And this is one of the best slides. This is how you guys can get in touch with us. So if you anybody has any additional questions that we haven't answered tonight, you can email us at info@27interceptor.com. You can call the hotline, leave a message. If they don't answer, they do answer between about 7 and 5 every day. But after that, you might have to leave a message. And then, of course, we have the website that covers all 4 phases. So there's a lot of good information on that website.
Great. And we do, we will, I saw somebody taking a picture of the screen. We will shoot this, this meeting info will be up on our website, so you'll be able to get it there. And I haven't seen any questions. David did have a very fine comment that they must have hired very short masonry workers over 100 years ago. And then Aaron, you're kind enough to provide your direct email and office number here. So that's another means of getting in touch with you. I know from working with you that you're really great at quick responses. And I'm just keep looking at the chat to see if anyone else has any other questions while we have Aaron. And he's staying all night. So if you think of something and we have time after Stout Street, we can come back to that as well, or follow up directly. If you have a specific question, we'll be saving the chat and we'll respond that way. So we are switching back to our PowerPoint. Thank you, Riley, for being amazing and taking care of all the technology here. While we're switching over, I'm going to let you know that we're going to be introducing one of our newer employees who actually lives close by in the neighborhood and is close to the neighborhood and is managing the Stout Street two-way conversion study. So I'm going to kind of pass the mic to Scott and Alicia to talk, to answer some of the questions in the chat that we've seen so far about why do we need a Stout Street two-way conversion? And I think the big picture is that's why we're doing a study, to figure out if we do, and the big picture. So with that, I will shut myself down and pass the mic.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Karen. Yeah, so just if we can get started here about the Stout Street two-way conversion study. So this project has been identified through a number of efforts in the neighborhood, including the NEDFP and TMP project that we discussed earlier. So if we actually jump to the next slide here, this is a quick intro of our project team. Myself as the project manager, Karen is helping moderate tonight. We've got Brett as well here for representing the NTMP, and then Alicia, who's representing our design consultant on this project. So our goal here is to create safer streets. DOTI is really all about safety. One of our top priorities is Vision Zero, having 0 fatalities on our streets. And so that's really a main driver of this project and really in all the work that we do. So if we can go ahead and jump to the next slide. So as I was saying, the Stout Street 2A conversion study has been identified in a number of different planning efforts in this neighborhood, going all the way back to the 1987 Curtis Park neighborhood plan, and was further mentioned in 1995, 2007, and then 2015 and 2019. So most recently out of the 5 points action plan and the prioritization process of the different improvements in the neighborhood, this project really rose to the top. So that's really what brings us here tonight and why we're looking at this. So the study area that we're looking at for the Stout Street 2A conversion study, we're looking at Stout Street between Broadway and Downing. And so part of this project is figuring out where, if it should be all of this stretch converted to 2A or some of this stretch. So that's really one of the main reasons that we're doing this study, is to really flesh out some of those details of this project and just get a better understanding of what we're going to do here to improve Stout Street. So next, we've got a couple polling questions. If we can.
Are you ready for the polling? It's polling time again.
Oh boy.
So a pop-up window is going to happen. We just did this. So for anyone new, please just answer the pop-up window with the poll, whether what's your relationship with Stout Street? Are you besties with Stout? Are you enemies with Stout? Do you live on Stout? Do you use it for recreation? Is it part of your bike route, your running route, your walking route, where you take the bus, where you go to school? And you can have all of the above. So let us know. That's just helpful for us to understand. And Gerald, yes, you are welcome for referencing how many years the Stout Street 2A conversion has been part of the conversation. I know it was a healthy conversation in the Stout Street, in the Curtis Park assessment. So it looks like we've got a lot of answers, and the most popular is I live along or near Stout Street. So thank you for that. And then folks recreate and go shopping and commute and access transit. Doesn't look like we have any school goers here. And then let's do the question 2 for the poll. And I'm seeing some other comments that we're going to get to in the Stout Street conversation, but let's go to question 2, which is, how do you travel on the street? Are you biking? Are you driving? Are you taking transit? Are you using rideshare? Are you walking? And again, you may be doing all of the above. So, and that's fine. And we'd love to hear that. It looks like right now transit, rideshare is 0, and transit is in the 20-ish%, whereas folks are walking and driving and biking or scootering. Almost equal. Walking is the winner, and driving comes in second at 70%, with biking and scootering, at least at this juncture, just a nose behind the drivers. So it looks like we need to get more transit users on the street, or people are walking over and taking the light rail. So lots of options in transit in the neighborhood. So thank you so much. And then Scott, I think you're going to get to this but I just want to share a few of the notes from the chat. Just that there are crashes on Stout, and why we are talking about the history. Why are we talking about a conversion, a two-way conversion, and the data? And I know we're just about to get into the speed and volume data, so just be aware of that. And hopefully, if there are any things that come up after Scott has gone into that, we'll circle back.
Awesome.
So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. All right, so yeah, as we start on the process of this study, one of our first steps was to collect some data to understand how Stout Street is working today. And then we can go ahead and use that data to inform our decisions as we move forward. And so this graphic here, along Stout Street at every intersection, we've called out what the traffic control is today. So the traffic signals are called out with a little signal there, and then where there are stop signs shown on this graphic, there are stop signs on the side street. It sounds like everyone's pretty familiar with the Stout corridor, so I'm sure we're all aware of what that's like. But as we started to collect data on the corridor, we've called out a couple different locations here where we collected speed and volume data. So that volume data that's shown in the bubbles, that's the 4,500 and 4,030 there. Those are actually an average. So we use a metric called the average daily traffic, which is the total number of vehicles that are passing through there over a 24-hour period. And so what we're seeing with that is that's a number of vehicles that could theoretically be accommodated by a single lane of traffic. So that makes Stout a good opportunity for consideration for a two-way conversion. And then another thing that we're seeing with our data collection is speeds. And so we've called out speeds at those same two locations. And the speed limit along the corridor today is 30 miles per hour. But we are seeing an 85th percentile speed that's above that. And so that 85th percentile speed, what that means is out of 100 vehicles, 85 of those vehicles are traveling this speed or below. And we use that for traffic analysis because it gives us a pretty good gauge of generally how fast traffic is going. And so what we're seeing is that the speeds today are exceeding that 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, and they're getting a little bit higher speeds on the northeast end of the corridor as it moves out of downtown. So next, we've got our crash data. So this is another major piece of data that we're using to inform our decisions on the corridor here, because safety is really important to us. And this is a really helpful tool to understand what's going on the corridor, where those potential areas of concern are. And that helps us look at patterns and what we can do to address those issues. So we've called out crashes at intersections on in the circular dots on this graphic, and then crashes that occurred mid-block are in the rectangles between the intersections. And so for this project, we're looking at data over a pretty long period to get an understanding of how the corridor is functioning over a long period of time. So we're looking at 5 years of data here. And over those 5 years of data, there were a total of 234 crashes. And you can see kind of how those were spread out along the corridor here. And we had 10 pedestrian crashes occur, and those are called out with the red dots on this graphic. And then there were also 7 bicycle crashes, and those are called out on in the blue dots here. Of those 234 total crashes, we only had 5 injury crashes and fortunately no fatalities. But there's certainly still some room for improvement, as we can see here.
And one note, just Scott, I think we'll get into it, but a lot of folks are talking about the existing conditions for cycling and concern about how comfortable that is, and you're just jumping into that now. So this will help clarify for anyone that isn't, it doesn't ride on Stout, what the conditions are on the bike facility there.
Totally, yeah. Yep, yeah, that's definitely the next thing that we're jumping into. So now we're looking at the corridor instead of from up above, we're looking along the corridor as if you're traveling. And yeah, so you can see today in the southern section of the corridor between Broadway and 26th, the bike lane is currently running along the curb. And then there is a parking lane that separates the bike lane from the vehicle travel lanes on Stout. So there are the two vehicle travel lanes going northeast bound with parking on either side. And then the bike lane, we call this configuration a parking protected bike lane because the parked cars are physically separating cyclists in the bike lane from the moving vehicles in the travel lane. So if we jump to the next slide, one of the existing conditions today that it sounds like people have picked up on is that the bike lane configuration does change at 26th Street. So from 26th to Downing, the vehicle parking lane is now up against the curb, and then the bike lane is separated from vehicle traffic with a buffer space. And so that's kind of a quick high-level view of what's going on the corridor today and with the configuration that we're working with as our existing condition. So next, we're jumping into what a future two-way Stout could look like. And so what we're looking at is taking one of those northeast bound vehicle travel lanes and changing the direction of that lane. So now those vehicles are going to be traveling southwest. And then the associated parking lane on the left side of the corridor changes direction as well. So we're retaining two parking lanes and two vehicle travel lanes, but now one vehicle travel lane goes northeast bound and the other one goes southwest. And the bike lane is going to be retained going northeast bound. But with this project and the opportunity to reconfigure street space on Stout, we're looking at trying to keep that parking protected bike lane configuration throughout the whole length of the corridor. So we can extend that space where the cyclists are separated by the parked vehicle lane from moving vehicles in the travel lane. So now that we kind of got a sense of what we're looking at for the corridor, now we can get into some potential benefits of this and why we're really looking at doing this in the first place. So one of the things that we've heard repeatedly from the community is that there's a desire to calm traffic on Stout and just create a lower stress environment and something that responds to the residential character of the area a little bit more. And that's one of the largest benefits of this two-way conversion. It also has safety benefits as well, because it's going to be lowering those speeds, and that just creates a more forgiving, safer environment for all road users. And then it's also a little bit more familiar context for people crossing the street or driving. It's just more familiar than a two-way, one-way street going through a neighborhood. And then it's also going to improve circulation in the neighborhood and connect destinations a little bit more directly than having to circle around on those one-way streets.
Hey, Scott, before we go to the next slide, well, actually, we can go to the next slide, but a couple of questions have come up regarding people getting confused in the area on different streets with the one-way to two-way conversions and turning the wrong way. So is that something that we'll be looking at as to how to make sure things are clear? And obviously we'll look at the chat and investigate some of the different one-way, two-way issues. Maybe if they're not Stout Street in the rest of the neighborhood, we'll share that with our area engineer team. Do you have any kind of thoughts on how what you're looking at and that benefits I think you've talked about with that two-way conversion because it's more familiar. Are there some other pieces there with the turning from some of the the numbered streets?
Yeah, I think one thing that this project would also look at is signage along the corridor. And that's something that we would definitely look at updating to kind of help direct people more clearly through this area.
And then there are some questions about speed, and maybe we can add that in the future to our street operations questions as to what we're looking at with speed, folks saying that 30 still feels pretty high. And then some questions about the rest of the two-way streets. I know for those that keep the Curtis Park assessment and Curtis Park neighborhood plan under their pillow, there was conversation of multiple two-way conversions, not just Stout, and we're taking them bit by bit. But one of the questions is, would Champa remain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with one of the reasons that we're looking at just Stout specifically and not Stout and Champa together, because even though today they do operate as kind of a one-way couplet, the street width on Stout is a lot wider than the street width on Champa. So on Champa, if there was a consideration to try to add another vehicle travel lane, we're in a situation where we would need to be removing something from the street. And so Stout is a great opportunity for that two-way conversion because we have this extra vehicle travel lane. And as we've seen from our data collection, it's that extra lane is not necessarily needed from a capacity standpoint, and it's allowing people to speed through the neighborhood. So it really makes Stout a good candidate for that two-way conversion. So, yeah.
And then I'm going to let you get into the street operations, and then I've got some questions about street classification. But I do want you to be able to get through this slide.
Cool, awesome. Okay, yeah. So these are kind of some main questions that we wanted to address here. So the first one is the use of curb space. And so as we showed with that cross section of the corridor and what it might look like in the future, we're looking at retaining 2 parking lanes on the street. So the curb space will still allow for 2 lanes of parked vehicles on Stout. But as we are looking at updating signage and things, we're going to be making sure that, you know, the signage for parking and loading zones, ADA spaces is all up to date and accurate. But we're not looking at removing one of the existing parking lanes. So next, looking at bicycles, we're looking at retaining that northbound bike lane and evaluating the potential for carrying the parking protected configuration for that throughout the whole corridor. And then with the school, because the Denver Language School campus is along the Stout Street corridor, our project team has been coordinating with the leadership at the campus there to make sure that a two-way conversion on Stout is not going to impact pickup or drop off for the school, and that we can still accommodate the movements that they need on Stout. And then the mid-block signals. So today, Stout has 2 different speed and gap mid-block signals. And so those signals were installed when the street was one-wayed, and the intention of those signals is to create more gaps in traffic so that pedestrians can cross, so that turning vehicles can go. But in a two-way configuration, those mid-block signals are not really compatible with that. So part of what we're looking at with this study is, in a two-way Stout, where would traffic signals be placed along the corridor? Because we would still want to retain traffic signals along the corridor to help just assign right of way and manage speeds. But those mid-block signals are not really compatible with the two-way street. So that's one of the questions that we're trying to answer with this study. And then with the RTD bus stop, because the 43 route currently runs on Stout, our project team has been coordinating with RTD to figure out how we can retain the bus stops. So at this point, we're not really looking at, major changes to those locations, but as more details are hashed out as far as the extents of the two-way conversion, we're going to continue coordinating with RTD and their service plans in the area.
Awesome. Well, before we jump to the last slide, sorry, Riley, I'm such a pain. I want to go through a couple of the questions in the chat. And I mentioned one, and that's some questions are, I mentioned the question about speed and question of whether we could reclassify Stout as a residential street to allow speed reduction to 20 miles an hour as part of the new Denver initiative. And Scott, I don't know, Brett, if you'd want to answer that, or if Scott, you want to jump in, but I wanted to give everyone a little opportunity to talk about street reclassification, because I know for sure that that has come up on many folks have asked that question on a variety of different streets. So Brett, do you want to take it? Scott?
Sure, I could take it if you want me to.
Give Scott a chance to have a sip of water.
Yeah, for sure. We'll give Scott a break. Yeah, so as you might know, street classification is a pretty big network level question. And the way that the city is approaching street reclassification, which we know certainly needs to be modified for certain streets, is to do it through our Denver Moves Everyone process. So that's a higher level strategic planning process to set the vision for transportation, big time vision for transportation throughout Denver. Yeah. And so that street reclassifications would be handled through that process. I think certainly a lot of this information and data that we receive from the Stout Street study will inform that, but it's being done as part of a separate larger study that's ongoing. So I don't know if there's anything else I missed there, Karen, but based
no, you got it.
Study, we won't have the ability to reclassify.
But the information from this study will be shared and will be considered in that bigger picture conversation. And then there is a question about whether congestion and pollution impact during rush hour will be assessed. And Scott, I believe that's something you'll be looking at, sort of the modeling about what this will do to traffic and whether it will cause delays, but I'll let you talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something that we are looking at with this study. And yeah, so as Karen alluded to, we're doing some traffic modeling to help us understand how the two-way street is going to operate. And we're using some of the data that we collected to understand how it's working today. And then we can take that and look at how it might look in the future with the one-way condition. How is that going to operate? So we are considering, traffic operations during rush hour through that modeling effort.
Great. And then there was a question, and I'll just provide a clarification. There was a question whether we were two-waying the bike facility, and the idea is no, we're just going to keep the one-way bike facility and looking at that being parking protected. Somebody answered in the chat, and I just wanted to confirm the answer they said was correct. Then there's a question on signals, and Brett, did you want to add anything to that?
Just a little bit of detail behind that is that the Stout Street right away, it just isn't large enough to include a two-way bike lane without taking away parking lane, basically, and probably not palatable at this moment.
And also the consideration that we do have, the bike network does operate as a couplet, Champa and Stout. So it's not that you can't get the other direction, it's that it's one block over. And then there is a, let's see, I just lost it. Hold on. Signals, are we considering, and Scott, I think you covered this, but maybe let's clarify, are you considering signals at 26th and 27th? And I believe you're just going to be looking at where signals should be across board. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, we're looking broadly at where it makes sense to put signals along there. And as we're doing that, we're using our data to drive that decision. So I think there were some comments about the crashes and where those are occurring. And that's certainly something that we're going to be taking into account as we look at where those signals are placed along the corridor.
Great, great. So we have a number, I'm just trying to catch all the different elements in chat. So give me a minute. We do have some time here. There's some questions about stop signs and whether there could be a stop sign or signal at every intersection between Park and Downing. My guess is that that's not something we generally do, but I think we will be looking cross-board at where it is appropriate to signalize on the corridor, signalize, or whether converting to four-way stops or whatever the case may be. It's a pretty comprehensive assessment, right, Scott?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, we'll be considering where those devices are warranted and where they make sense in terms of the larger context of the area.
Okay, and I'm going to throw this out for whomever wants to answer from our team questions, and I'm this close to giving the answer, but I promise I won't. Question about that parking protected bike lane, does that increase the cyclist risk of being hit by somebody who's turning from one of the side streets and not being able to see the cyclist because they're behind a parked car? And Scott, you can jump in or toss the mic to Brett. You both know the answer right now.
Yeah, I might toss to Brett because I know this is very much his wheelhouse.
Sure. So with any time we do a parking protected bike lane, prior to the intersection, we were talking site triangles earlier. We call it an approach clear space.
Dear God, really?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had to throw it out there. But that's basically, it's a certain distance of parking as you approach that intersection that we have no parking zones so that the sight lines are clear enough to where, considering the speed of the bike and speed of crossing vehicles, the crossing vehicle, or sorry, the
cyclist
will be seen before the crossing vehicle would look to cross. So that's all taken care of in those design details, and will be taken into account if and when the parking protected bike lane is extended.
I like to think about it basically as daylighting for the cyclists, just to keep it simple.
Yeah.
And then some folks talking about loving the plan and consider retaining existing signals and adding stop signs, and some detailed comments which we'll get about the sight lines 27th to Downing, and we'll look at the cadence of those stops, any signalization or stop. And then yes, somebody said, to be crystal clear, you are correct. Reclassification is not a possibility with this study, because it's part of a larger citywide effort, but the data from this study will be used in that larger citywide effort through Denver Moves. And then
sorry, Karen, I just want to, that point I think is one that I think I'm seeing in the comments is something that everybody wants to be really, really clear on. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on the last part.
Yeah.
Because this isn't going to be included right away as part of any kind of reclassification, does that negate any discussion whatsoever about a reduction in the speed limit on Stout Street? Like, is it firmly 30 miles an hour as a result of that, or is that still, there were those two things separate?
Two different things. So I was just getting to that. So reclassification to a neighborhood street is part of that bigger citywide effort. Looking at the actual speed limit, say taking it from 30 to 25, looking at what it is, that could still be something that we at least get the baseline data for. And Brett, I don't know if you.
Yeah. So the way we're currently looking at speed limits right now, is in setting speed limits is we would do the conversion, and then we would be studying doing data collection on that roadway to see what the speed limit can be.
And Brett,
So
I think
yeah.
I was going to say a really great reference point for folks, which is a walking distance away, is Walnut Street. And Brett and I both worked on that. And that's where, do you want to go into a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for those who kind of want a recent example of a 1 to 2-way conversion, Walnut Street is a good example. We did that back in 2020, September of 2020 now. Wow. And just changing it to 2-way conversion, 2 points to make there, it significantly changes the feel of the roadway and slows traffic down, is what we can see. But also as part of that, as Karen mentioned, we came back 6 months later, studied the roadway for where we needed to put all-way stops, studied the roadway for where we need to put crossings and things like that. So much about the traffic patterns change when you do a 1-way to 2-way conversion that we have to wait till after that's done to evaluate how the traffic patterns are going, where do we need, which intersections we need to enhance crosswalks, which intersections we need to do traffic control and speed changes. So
Yeah.
that's how the city looks at it.
Great. Well, I'm going to answer one quick question and then let Scott get to the last 2 slides. And then we'll jump in and see if there are any other questions. I just want to comment, we are recording this. We've got all the comments. So things that aren't questions, like comments about specific destinations, sightlines, et cetera, we'll certainly take that into account. There is a question about whether a neighborhood can petition to reclassify, and know that reclassification, it's a citywide analysis, as Brett mentioned, of the network as a whole. So it's not a petition, just like you can't petition for a 4-way stop. That's something that we have to look at from a traffic engineering safety standpoint. Ditto on petitioning for reclassification of a street. It's something we can certainly bring to that larger Denver Moves context, but it's not a we got 500 signatures and now we're a neighborhood street factor, because we really have to think about the network as a whole and how folks are getting through our city, whether they're walking or biking, taking transit or driving. So that's one big one. And let's hop to the next 2 slides and then come back to questions, unless Brett or Scott wants to provide any more info on that.
Actually, Karen, I wanted to jump in real quick just on the arterials reclassification. So I'm helping out with Denver Moves Everyone, and there's a lot of different things that are tied to whether something is considered an arterial collector or a local street. A lot of different things, whether it can be related to the type of funding that we're eligible to receive, the type of traffic calming improvements that we're allowed to do, a whole gamut of different things. And that's why it's really important for us to take more of a holistic policy review about how we're classifying streets. And that's why we're doing it at a citywide level within Denver Moves Everyone. And so that's part of the intention. And one of the goals with that is to make sure that how streets are being classified is sort of meeting the neighborhood character and the intent. And so that's something that we're trying to take a deeper look at. So I just wanted to add those details in.
Thank you. And be consistent, because consistency is key. Thank you. And we do have, I'm hoping that somebody can pop the bit.ly for Denver Moves Everyone in the chat, because that would be a great resource for folks. And we're really doing a big push to engage more people in Denver Moves Everyone. So there are lots of opportunities coming up, and trying to look at coming to events in the neighborhood as well. So with that, Scott, let's talk about what's happening next with the timeline.
Yeah, exactly. So so this graphic really shows kind of the whole life of this project and where the Stout Street study fits within that. So as we touched on earlier, this project has been identified through a number of planning efforts in the past. And then this study specifically, we kicked off with a stakeholder meeting earlier this spring, and then today we're here at our public meeting number 1, and our next step is going to be working through the analysis on our study and doing some of those traffic models and the other elements that we've discussed and really start developing concepts. And then this summer, we're going to be coming back to our stakeholder group as well as the public to share some of those concepts and get some feedback before the study makes its final recommendations for Stout Street. And then after the study wraps up, the recommendations that come out of this are then, as funding and programming allows, move into design and then construction. So the outcome of this study is going to be late summer. We're going to have a document outlining recommendations for what the future of Stout Street should look like. So if we can jump to the next slide here. Yeah, so next step. And that's a great way to stay up to date with what's going on with the project and where we're at. Like I mentioned, we will have a second community meeting this summer to provide more detail on the project as we develop concepts and move forward with our analysis. And then if you're interested in being on our email list, you can leave your email in the chat here or visit our project website, or you can also contact myself at my email there. Just include the Stout Street 2A study in your subject line. So that's kind of a view of where this project is going and where we're headed. So I think that wraps us up with Stout.
Well, it doesn't just wrap us up with Stout, it wraps us up with the whole kit and caboodle. But I do want to check the chat again to see if there are a few questions. We have one question: what's the current classification of Stout? Since we're diving into classification, is it a collector? Is it an arterial? We know it's not. So Scott, can you let us know?
Yeah, so today Stout is classified as a residential arterial.
Not one that everyone's familiar with. And thank you everyone that's putting their emails into the chat. We really appreciate that. There was a teeny tiny gap in recording, but we'll fix that, and we'll make sure we will add everyone. Anthony Aragon, we've got a lot of folks that are in the background here that are amazingly helpful. Anthony Aragon is one of those. So I'm again just gonna quickly check in, see if there are any other tidbits and questions in here. I did pop in, hopefully relatively correct. I got to it, denvermoveseveryone.com. Mine has a July 2021, but don't worry about that. It gets you to the website. So that's a great spot to talk about the future of Denver street classification and just transportation mobility as a whole. So I am not seeing any kind of big questions coming up. I'm seeing a lovely thank you. You're welcome, Hugh. Thank you everyone for being here. We may be able to end 4 minutes early, which I just want to say is pretty impressive given how much information we covered, how many projects we covered, and how much we appreciate you all for being here, because we couldn't do all this great work without you, the prioritization, and the feedback, and staying involved with projects since 1987, because we know that the Curtis Park Neighborhood Plan was completed in 87. It wasn't started in 87. That was when it was completed. So we know a lot of you have been with us for the long haul, and that you're seeing a lot of things. Hopefully you're seeing a lot of things that you've talked about for a long time actually being implemented, but also staying the course and keeping us on our toes, but also letting us know what the priorities are. So, and that your priorities are the same or when they've changed. So really appreciate you all. Scott, Brett, Aaron, any final tidbits to add?
I think you summed it up well. Yeah, thank you everyone for attending. We appreciate all the continued back and forth and interaction. And yeah, we couldn't do this without you all. So thank you.
Yeah, and big thank you to Ashley for being here from the council office. Scott, Aaron.
just thank you everyone for spending your evening with us. I know we threw a lot of information at you all, so really appreciate you being here.
Great. And Anthony, a preemptive strike on when will this be posted? And it'll be posted under Northeast Downtown, but we'll also have a link at Stout and 27th websites. We'll make sure it's kind of linked everywhere. What's the timing of that?
I would say by Monday at the latest. I will download it tomorrow, but then I need to allow Ken Tomzak with the Public Information Office time to then do his magic behind the scenes and then post it on the website. But we'll still send an email out to all of the participants tonight that we do have emails for that will include this presentation as well as the link to the recording, which can be found on the website.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. I lied. Now you're only getting 1 minute back. Have a fabulous night and thank you so much.